This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here. A review of Carnival Legend this week, a Western Caribbean sailing from Tampa. And staff writer Richard Sims has a recap of all the cruise news over the past week. Jumping right to him now. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
Big news out of the Carnival Cruise Line camp regarding their controversial new rewards program.
Yeah, we wanted to cover this last week, but it had just come out when we were recording, and we were sort of waiting for more clarification. And while we did get a little bit more clarification, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. But long story short, Carnival blinked. You'll recall that a few months ago, Carnival rolled out the news that the VIFP program was going to be replaced with Carnival Rewards program. And that news landed with a resounding thud. A whole lot of people complained very, very, very loudly. At the time, the plan was very clearly in the embryonic stages, even as, whether it was John Heald or the brand ambassador or Christine Duffy, the Carnival president, when they were talking about it, they tried to make it very clear that things weren't necessarily solidified and that they had, because this isn't rolling out until next summer of 2026, so they have time to work out the details. Well, now we're getting a little bit more of those details, including a really, really big, very important one. The biggest one that's going to be of most interest, at least to Diamond members, is that anyone achieving that status by May 31st of 2026 will retain their Diamond status for life. That was one of the things that people were very unhappy with, was they worked hard to get this status, and then they were going to have to re-earn it every 2 years or 5 years or whatever. Now, it turns out that once you have achieved that status, you will retain it. They also announced that those who reach platinum status by that same date, May 31st, 2026, will get an annual quote-unquote boost of 10,000 stars. Now, I'll admit, this whole stars and point things is confusing to me, but don't worry, because Carnival doesn't even know what it all really means. In announcing some of these changes, John Heald essentially asked that question and answered by saying, I am unable to tell you that. So right now, it's all being sort of worked out. If you go to cruiseradio.net, you will find a story that outlines this a little bit more in detail, but there are going to be big changes between now and then.
Yeah, it's what you were saying with the 10% star boost for platinum, and then John to turn around and say, and you're probably wondering what stars are. Well, that is to be determined. It was just a weird message to send out and put in front of potentially millions of people.
Yeah, especially in light of the fact that people are already unhappy with the change. Mm-hmm. So to be, like I said, the Diamond people, they're going to be happy about this. Yeah. This is a good change for them. But for everybody else who's got questions, it's sort of like they're just sort of shrugging and saying, well, we'll let you know when we know.
It's also bringing in a lot of money for Carnival right now, because I'm seeing all over chatter on Reddit, Facebook, X, that people are doing, they're calling it the Diamond Run, where they're trying to book all these cruises before May of next year to lock in that status for life.
Okay, Doug, you know more about this than I do. Is it worth it? Is being Diamond really worth going through all of those hoops in order to achieve it?
I think that's a subjective question, but for me, I don't know. I enjoy priority boarding when it's offered. I enjoy the free laundry and that kind of stuff. I don't know what will be going away.
And how much things could change as they continue rolling this out. Who knows what ultimately your benefits will be.
Yeah, and speaking of Carnival, a story about a missing cruise passenger took a surprising twist this week.
Doug, if I didn't know better, I'd think this was some kind of publicity stunt. There is a new movie coming out called The Woman in Cabin 10. The movie, which will hit Netflix in a couple of weeks, is about a woman who goes missing from a yacht. And it's based on the novel by Ruth Ware. Really good book if anybody's out there who is looking for a good book to read on their cruise. But while that's a piece of fiction, the story we're about to discuss is actually real life. Apparently, a woman named Jessica Collins was traveling on the Carnival Horizon when the ship stopped in Bonaire. She got off, as did many others. It's a port. People like to get off and explore. But Jessica didn't return to the ship. In fact, Carnival says that she disembarked with all of her belongings, leaving a cash tip for her room steward and a note thanking him for everything, which, by the way, kudos to her. As she's getting off this ship and planning to vanish into the ether, she thinks to leave a nice note and a tip for her room steward. I got to applaud that. That's pretty awesome. Anyway, when Carnival reached out to her, she responded to their care team saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, and I just want to be left alone." I don't think that's going to happen because there's still kind of a search going on for her. People want answers because, it's in this day and age, it's not only unusual to try and just disappear, it's also very difficult. And of course, her family and friends want to make sure that this isn't somehow some kind of kidnapping. And while I will not give away the surprise ending of the woman in cabin 10, if this turns out to be like that, my jaw will hit the floor.
And I know we've heard this one many times before. Royal Caribbean has announced a change to their next ship's inaugural sailing.
Here we go again. Repeat after me, regular listeners. Only book an inaugural sailing if you're okay with things going sideways. Often they wind up being delayed because of problems at the shipyard. But in the case of Royal Caribbean's Legend of the Seas, construction is going so well that her inaugural sailing is being moved from August 2nd to July 11th. And that means they're going to be adding 3-week-long what they're calling preview cruises, because of course they have to figure out a way to sell this to people without really royally ticking off the people who, booked an inaugural sailing. There are people out there, including a lot of influencers, who want to be on that first sailing, whether it's because they want the content that they're going to create, whether it's because they just, they like being the first people on a new ship. I think that's cool. I love the idea. But this is kind of why I don't really book inaugurals, because it's so often changed. Royal obviously recognizes that there are a lot of people who place a premium value on being the ship's first passengers. So they're offering those who have, flexibility in their schedules. They're offering them an opportunity to switch their reservation to the new official inaugural, which is on July 11th. But there's a catch. If you're booked in a suite, those guests are being given a week to transfer to the new date with price protection in place. In other words, what they paid on that ship, they will pay on that sailing initially, they'll pay on this new inaugural. But those in categories below suites, they can switch, but they'll only be able to do so at, quote, the prevailing rate. I'm willing to bet that rate will be higher because, when's the last time you heard of a situation like this in which it was lower? So it just seems natural to assume that the people who had bookings in, say, balconies on the original sailing and are now wanting to get on this other sailing, I'm willing to bet they're going to pay a little bit more than they did original. Anyway, the ship will be sailing these voyages in the Western Med, and it'll be leaving out of the port that I can never pronounce. Civitavecchia. Did I get it right?
Civitavecchia? I don't know either.
Never come to us for pronunciation. Right. Neither of us is going to get it right.
And some cruisers got a nasty surprise when they returned from their sailing.
Oh, talk about the worst return ever. If you think a bad debarkation is the worst thing that can happen to you at the end of a cruise, think again. Apparently, 17 cars were stolen from a supposedly secure facility near the port of Southampton. It happened around September 9th and 10th, and there aren't a whole lot of details as to how the thieves managed to pull off such a brazen stunt. It's one thing to steal a car. It's another to steal 17 of them. The Southampton Cruise Parking Service operates a park and ride service for guests, and that's where this took place. As of this recording, 6 of the cars have been reclaimed. A detective told the BBC that they do not underestimate the significant impact this incident has had on the victims who returned from holiday to find their cars missing. They're doing everything in their power to, find these cars. They've given the good news to some people that, their cars have been found. What's interesting is that they found some cars, but not others, which, does that mean they were being sold on the black market? You would think that if you found one car, it'd be like a chop shop and you found all of them. They may be in pieces, but you found them all. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. So hopefully they will, find the rest of them. And this is a really good reminder that it's a good thing to use the parking facilities at the port that are usually, although this place said it was secure and it said it had 24-hour surveillance. So you have to wonder with 24-hour surveillance how 17 cars were stolen.
That's wild.
We'll let you know if there's any update on this one.
And we have an update on the newest, biggest ship to ever sail with Margaritaville at sea.
That's right, Doug. A few weeks ago, we told listeners about Margaritaville at Sea Beachcomber, which is joining the fleet. It's currently sailing as the Costa Fortuna, I believe. It's going to start sailing with Margaritaville at Sea in 2027. At the time we made that, we talked about that news, it was a little unclear where the ship would be sailing from or what type of itineraries. Well, we now know that the Beachcomber will be home ported in Miami, and she will be doing mostly week-long voyages to the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. The company's CEO said that feedback from travel agents and customers kind of made it clear that while they like the Margaritaville at Sea product, they wanted longer voyages because, their ships, their other two ships mostly do very short trips, 2-3 days at most. So this will be offering week-long sailings, and that will obviously be a pretty big switch for the company. So, this is new territory for them. They're going to a new port, they're doing new itineraries, and it'll be fun to see how this plays out in the long run.
And if you were concerned that there just aren't enough huge ships out there, well, we've got good news for you.
That's right, because shortly after Royal Caribbean announced that their third Icon-class ship, which we talked about a little bit earlier, Legend of the Seas, is going to arrive earlier than expected in the summer of 2026, comes news that they've got a fourth unnamed ship already in the works, and they're going to be rolling out an unnamed class of ships that'll debut in 2027. And they've contracted for a fifth Icon-class ship. Now, the Icon-class ships are the biggest in the world. And every time they roll one out, they're a little bit bigger and they get the whole publicity. And, we saw when the last one rolled out, we saw the reports about, psychiatrists reacting to how people look at the picture of these ships, that kind of thing. But they also have an option to build 2 more ships on the Icon class, which would be a 6th and a 7th if they decide to do so. If you want something a little smaller, Royal will also be rolling out a new class of ships, as well as a 6th Oasis class ship. And while the Icon ships are the biggest in the world, the Oasis class is the second biggest class of ships in the world. So they're a little smaller and yet still big enough to satisfy all your needs. The CEO of Royal Caribbean, Jason Liberty, said that the company is ushering in, and I'm quoting here, a new era of innovation that will disrupt the vacation sector through 2036. Doug, we've talked about this before. Is there a tipping point where it's enough? How many of these huge ships do we need, and how much can the industry sustain?
It'll take one maritime accident for a correction, in my opinion.
It seems almost inevitable. It's been a long time since we've had anything like that happen on the seas. I guess probably the Concordia was the last, right? It's inevitable that something will sooner or later happen. It's just, it's just the way the world works. It will be interesting to see how the industry reacts to that and what it takes for things to sort of slow down. I personally think it will not be something like that. I think it will be some sort of environmental regulations that put, sort of a cap on how big they can be and all of that. But right now, all we know is that it's sort of a boom time, and they are taking advantage of that by building as much as they can.
I'm going to throw in a listener question that I got this morning, actually, and you'll be able to answer this on the fly here. Ron from Connecticut, listening to the show, Richard was breaking down onboard credit on Virgin Voyages last week. I was trying to follow, but having a hard time. Can you clarify what he was talking about the incentive you get if you purchase onboard credit in advance?
Okay, so what we're talking about here is not necessarily onboard credit. Virgin has 2 different things. They have Sailor Loot, which is, onboard credit. And most of the time, unless there's some kind of special thing going on, you do not get any kind of extra incentive when buying Sailor Loot. The other is a bar tab, and that is money that can only be spent at the bars. Sailor loot can be spent anywhere on the ship. It can be spent in the gift shops. It can be spent at bars, whatever. But the bar tab is exclusively for your alcohol purchases. And the bonus there is pretty sweet. For my sailing, I bought a $1,000 bar tab for two of us. I'm not that big a drunk. Because we bought a $1,000 bar tab, we got $250 added to that. So we had $1,250 in total, which, by the way, was way too much. At any level, $200 and up that you purchase a bar tab, you get a bonus. It might be $25, $50, $75, all the way up to the $250 that you get with $1,000. If you run out of bar tab, you can always continue to charge drinks to your room. So there's the smart thing to do is sort of take a look and figure out exactly how much you think you're going to drink. You can go online and find menus to give you an approximation. Most drinks are around $15. You can figure out sort of how much you drink. Make sure to factor in if you're going to be on a port-intensive itinerary, because clearly on sea days, you're going to have more time to be spending drinking than you will if you're spending a lot of time in port. Do the math, math is nobody's favorite, but do a little bit of math. And then get the bar tab that you think is going to closest resemble what you are going to drink. And let's say you come out to $200. Buy a $200 bar tab and you will get a bonus. I think at $200, it's $25 if I'm not mistaken. But you can find it all outlined on the Virgin Voyages website. It's, rarely do you hear the terms money for nothing unless it's a Dire Straits song and the next words are, and chicks for free. But in this case, you are getting sort of money for nothing as long as you factor it in correctly and don't over purchase, in which case you're going to end up throwing money away.
I wish they would change that, right? Where if you don't spend it all, you can convert it. Like you said last week, convert it to something. But it's like, yeah, if you buy that $1,000 bar tab, you damn sure better deplete it because it's going to go back to the company.
Completely. I would say that, like I said, I think the smartest thing they could possibly do would be to say, hey, you have $200 left on your bar tab. Go to the Future Voyages or whatever they call it center and put that on as a deposit toward your next cruise. And, that way they're guaranteeing that you're coming back because you're not going to let that $200 sit there. It would be a really smart move. But as you countered, it's also, from a business standpoint, smart to say, no, we're just going to keep that money. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, thank you, my friend.
Glad to be here.
The world is constantly changing. Your place for news is still the same. Online and on demand at cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
Ryan just returned from a 7-night cruise on Carnival Legend out of Tampa. It went over to the Western Caribbean, and he joins us on the line to talk about it. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great, Doug. How are you?
Good. It's good to talk to you. And taking this little 7-night cruise, you're in the Michigan area. So, of course, what made you want to take this 7-nighter on Legend?
Well, this was the first year that our oldest daughter was away at college. And so we were looking for a spring break trip for just my wife and I and my son. And we offered him the opportunity to pick what type of vacation he wanted to. And smartly, he chose to go on another cruise. So we've cruised several times in the past. And so we were all in on that decision. And so we found some cruise itineraries that worked well for the spring break schedule and gave him a few options to look at. Carnival ships, because we've been cruising mostly with Carnival since we caught the bug about 8 or 9 years ago. And so watched some YouTube video tours of the ships that we were looking at, and the Carnival Legend really stood out to him. He really thought that the drop slide, the water slide, was a great option, and he really thought that the glass funnel that you could see through was really cool. And so he really liked that ship, and it was a new ship to us. We'd never sailed the Legend before, or even a Spirit class ship, so it was really interesting to us. And when we saw that it was sailing from Tampa, we thought that would be a good option for us. We had sailed from Tampa previously and had a good cruise experience.
What do you think his second choice would have been if he didn't say cruising? Where would he have taken you?
You never know. Our son tends to just have his own way of going about things, but sometimes it's a beach vacation, sometimes it's checking out some caves in Kentucky. So We've done a variety of things, but we were pretty happy that he chose cruising.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you made your way down from Michigan to Tampa, Florida. Any pre-cruise time before boarding?
Not really. Had a pretty tight time frame on the front end. We knew we were going to have some time afterwards, after disembarkation, rather. We were going to fly out the following day, so we knew we would have some time in Tampa afterwards. And so we just got right to an Airbnb and then went to sleep, and then got up the next morning and took a ride share to the cruise port.
All right, so you're making your way to the port of Tampa. How was embarkation, and how was the process, and how long did it take from curb to the ship? I've never actually boarded like a full cruise from Tampa before.
Well, it was really smooth, and this is what we had noticed. Tampa does a better job of managing early arrivals, more so than other cruise ports that we've been. They actually set up lines pretty well, and they have a line that's available to people who are arriving on time for their arrival appointment and those who are early arrivals. And unfortunately, I didn't pay close enough attention to our Airbnb checkout time, and so we arrived a little bit early, actually over an hour early to the cruise port. And so they kindly guided us over to the early arrivals line. But as they were processing the on-time arrivals, they were moving those through very quickly. They would allow people that had arrived early to also go through. We got to the port and got on the ship in just under an hour. We actually got on board the ship about 15 minutes before our arrival appointment time. Nice. So we thought that was a pretty fantastic deal. And we also measure curb to Guy's Burger. Mm-hmm. Once we get on board, we see how long it takes us to get a Guy's Burger in hand. And so our curb to Guy's Burger time was about an hour, 20 minutes.
I like that, curb to Guy's Burger. I'll have to remember that one. So embarkation process, how was it like as far as going through security, passport check? What do you just do one final check-in after your passport and you're on the ship?
Yeah, you check in and you go up to the desk once you make your way through the line. They check your documents. They see that everything is squared away. Then they guide you through to the waiting area if there is a wait. And in our case, we went right from the desk agent through the line up to the photo opportunity where they offer to take your picture in front of the banner with the ship in front of it. Mm-hmm. And then once you get on board, the keys are available in the little mailboxes outside the stateroom doors once they're available to guests around 1:30.
Now, once you make your way on board, what were your first impressions of Carnival Legend?
Overall, we thought it was a really beautiful ship. We were lucky in that it had undergone a dry dock between the time that we booked it and the time that we sailed. And so even though there were some updates, it still kind of had that classic, Joe Farkas type of decor that really stood out and was very distinctive. We thought it was a really spacious ship as well. The staff on board welcoming people were quite friendly. And overall, it was a fabulous first impression to come on board into that main atrium that had the glass elevators that went all the way up to decks 10 and 11.
Was this your first Spirit class ship or just your first time on Legend?
It was our first Spirit class ship.
Okay. Yeah, I love the layout of those ships. You make your way to your stateroom. What kind of room did you book, and what did you think of it throughout the week?
We had an interior stateroom on deck 7 toward the front of the ship, and we thought that for the three of us, it was quite spacious. The decor was still a little dated, but it had some nice updates. In particular, we liked that the two bedside lamps each had USB plugs. There was a USB-A and a USB-C plug in each bedside lamp, and that went along with the standard US plug and European plugs that were available at the desk.
How did the space situation in the cabin play out with three of you sailing and putting your belongings, your suitcases and everything up for the 7 nights?
We thought there was plenty of storage in the room, and that was surprising to us as well. We noticed that the bedside tables actually had drawers, and I think every other Carnival ship we've ever sailed just kind of had an open box without drawers. So the drawers were a really nice touch. So plenty of storage. For 3 of us, it was nice. My son had the Pullman bunk that flipped down from the ceiling, and our room actually had 2 of those. We thought it might have been tight for 4 people with belongings and just space maneuvering in the cabin. But for 3 of us, we thought it was plenty of space.
Wait, and what deck were you on?
We were on deck 7.
Okay. So you're kind of like right in the middle there between all the actions, like 2, 3, and 4 on that one. And then the what is it, like deck 9 or 10 is the Lido on this one?
Yes. And we chose deck 7 specifically because we wanted to be kind of equidistant from all the action on the Lido, plus all of the fun things that were down on decks 2 and 3. And so we tend to be very, very careful when we choose our stateroom location because we want to have a good experience throughout the course of the sailing.
Smart man. Let's talk about the food on Carnival Legend up at the Lido Marketplace, the buffet. How was the food, and did it ever feel too crowded up there?
It never did, and that was really surprising to us. We thought of any Carnival cruise we've ever taken, this ship managed crowds in the buffet extremely well. It was extremely rare for us to have any significant line at any point in the buffet. They use their space really creatively. We noticed particularly at breakfast, some of the venues that were open at lunch would convert into omelet stations. And so instead of having 1 or 2 spots where people could get an omelet or fresh fried eggs, there were 3 and sometimes 4 spots available. They converted Pizza Pirate to an omelet station. They converted the deli into an omelet station, and the same thing with the seafood corner. So it was quite surprising to us, but it made for a really great experience in the buffet. The food overall was pretty good. We don't tend to do the buffet a lot except for breakfast, but we did breakfast in the buffet 3 mornings, and then one night we just didn't love the menu that was in the main dining room. So we hit up the buffet for dinner and then got some food from the deli and also from the seafood corner.
If I remember correctly, the Pizza Pirate, or whatever they're calling the pizza place now, that's on the inside, not outside, right?
That's correct. It's toward the aft part of the buffet on the starboard side, and it was open from noon to midnight.
Okay. And then if you're going outside there, kind of by the pool, you have Guy's Burger Joint, which you mentioned, and the Blue Iguana Cantina. Did you hit them up multiple times throughout the cruise?
Yeah, that was our go-to for lunch, particularly on sea days. Guy's tends to be very consistent, and Blue Iguana does as well. And even as popular as those 2 venues are, we never waited in line more than a minute to get either the Guys or the tacos or burritos, which was a first for us.
You mentioned earlier this was a spring break cruise. How do you gear up for sailing a cruise like this where you know it's going to be crazy?
It was a spring break cruise, and so we had prepared ourselves for lots of crowds, lots of kids, and it was surprising that it wasn't. We never really heard what the capacity percentage was on the ship, but being that it was spring break sailing out of Tampa, we knew there were lots of folks from the Midwest on that ship. And being tournament time, with both Michigan and Michigan State in the men's tournament, we saw lots of familiar gear on our fellow passengers.
The main dining room, it has 1 main on this ship, Carnival Legend, which is deck 2 and 3 aft, I believe. How was it, and what time dining did you have?
We chose anytime dining because we wanted some flexibility. We were also sailing with a family, friends that we knew, my son's best friend and his parents, and then they had a daughter that was upper elementary. And so we wanted some flexibility in case we had some different things going on. So we chose anytime dining. And as with other Carnival ships, you check in on the Hub app, and then they let you know when you can approach the dining room. Our wait times were pretty short, mostly 10 to 15 minutes usually for a party of 7, which I thought was really reasonable. The food overall in the main dining room was good for dinner. And we did actually do the main dining room for breakfast on uh, 3 or 4 of the days, and we found the quality of the food, both at breakfast and dinner, to be really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
We thought the service, speed of service, was much better than it had been on the last few cruises that we had done. This ship, they're using the handheld electronic menu entry, and so they can go around the table and take everyone's order, put it in right away, and then it goes right to the kitchen. And so most evenings and for our breakfasts, we had service times that were really reasonable. The only exception to that was the sea day brunch. On one morning, we did a sea day brunch in the late morning, and it felt like they just struggled to get the food out pretty quickly, even though they weren't busy. So it was a little bit surprising to us. But other than that blip, the main dining room overall was great.
If you're on a Carnival ship like a week long and there's more than one sea day, which most of in the Caribbean do have more than one, so day one is the sea day brunch. What are the other mornings?
This ship, if I recall, on the 3 sea days we had, offered the sea day brunch 2 different days.
Okay.
And then the third day, I think it was just the standard breakfast menu for the main dining room.
Okay. Any specialty restaurants on this one?
There are 2 specialty restaurants that are offered, Fahrenheit 555, and they have the bonsai sushi. Mm-hmm. We did not do the sushi, but we did do dinner one night, just the adults in Fahrenheit 555, and it was not crowded that night. There were one of I think 3 parties in the restaurant that night, mm-hmm. and the service there was fabulous. And of course, it's underneath the funnel, so to kind of look up out and be able to see the sky through the red glass funnel was a pretty remarkable experience. And you could tell that even though the ship had gone through the dry dock, they kept some of the old, beautiful dishes that they must have been using for 20 years since the ship first came out. The dishes were really unique, and it made for a nice ambiance in the steakhouse.
Did you do room service at all?
We did not.
No. Okay. Well, how was the entertainment on this 7-night cruise, and what did y'all think of it?
Overall, we thought the entertainment was good. We tend to like to listen to live music, and so they offered the things that you would come to expect on board Carnival, the violin trio, a full band that played a different variety of genres of music. There was also one solo guitarist that just did some acoustic sets, and then they had an acoustic duo that we thought was really great. In particular, we made it a point to catch a couple of their shows. Not only did they perform, but they also had a little booklet of songs that they could do. It was probably 7 or 8 pages of letter-size sheets, and they would take requests from that book from the audience. And so it made for a really fun experience.
Nice.
We didn't do the piano bar. When it came to production shows, we didn't really attend the production shows. The friends that we were with didn't really care for them, and we had seen at least a couple of them before, so we didn't check out the production shows. But we did enjoy one night of comedy. There were a couple of comedians that performed in the early part of the sailing, and then they switched them out about halfway through. We thought the one comedian, his name was Manny Oliveira, was really funny. Did a lot of crowd work instead of just having a particular set, and literally walked around the entire Firebird Lounge and just picking people out and just making jokes. And it was a really fun experience with the comedy that night. And then we finally, we did check out the Love and Marriage show, which is a Carnival classic, and we thought it was hilarious as usual.
Like most ships, the casino is located on the lower deck, and you have to transit it if you're going from, let's say, the main dining room up to the theater. Well, you don't have to. You can go up a deck if you want. But how was the smoke situation in there, and also in the areas leading into the casino?
So the smoke was definitely noticeable as you approached the casino, while you were in the casino, and then as you were leaving. But once you got, more than, 50 feet away from the casino, either forward or aft, the smell faded pretty quickly. Within the casino itself, the smoke smell was present, but I wouldn't say it was heavy. I think they removed the casino bar in the last dry dock, and so I think that helps cut down on the amount of smoking that happens in the casino, because there's, unless you're playing actively, you're not allowed to smoke in the casino, and I didn't see a ton of people hanging out there just to smoke. I did notice though on deck 9, they had a smoking area on deck 9 and deck 10. And there were quite a few smokers on the starboard side of deck 9, which was not open to the air. There's quite a few windows there. So if you were walking on the starboard side of deck 9 by the forward pool, you would walk through quite a bit of smoke there, which was a little bit surprising. You just had to remember, if you didn't care for the smoke, just make sure you go up to deck 10 or take the other side of the ship.
I'm curious if you mentioned there were some games going on. Did you get to go into a fairly new venue, which is the Heroes Tribute Bar right there next to the casino?
We did. We were there on the night of embarkation because we were rooting for Michigan State, and so they were in the tournament. And so we spent a few hours in the Heroes Tribute Bar, which, as you mentioned, had been updated. It's open to the casino, so you get a little bit of smoke smell in from the casino, but it wasn't too bad. But there were some good crowds in there, and it was a good time. And the bar service there was a little bit tight, but the Red Frog Pub was right next door, and so that's usually where the full band was playing. And so you could either get a drink at that bar at Heroes or hop over next door to the Red Frog.
How was the ship on sea days as far as crowds and congestion?
Overall, it was pretty amazing how congested it didn't feel. I think the ship just manages space really well. And even in the Serenity or on the main Lido deck, on the sea days, the loungers would tend to fill up relatively early. But if you were willing to go off to the side or into some of the areas where they had just standard tables and chairs, you could find a spot to sit, either in the sunshine or in the shade, which is what we preferred.
Since the drop slide was a big factor for your son, was he able to enjoy it?
Yes, he spent many hours on the drop slide and in the he tends to like the hot tubs as well, which I've noticed on this sailing, a lot of kids in the hot tubs on the main Lido. And so a lot of the adults would go back to the Serenity deck and the aft part of deck 9. And so there were quite a few. Serenity was really spacious aboard this ship, and so we spent a decent amount of time back there on our sea days.
Also on the Lido, you have to love those double pools.
Yeah, that was really nice, and I think that's becoming a rare feature because it had the double pools on the Lido, and then it had a third pool in Serenity, and then a few hot tubs back in Serenity. I think one hot tub in the Lido, so plenty of options for people that like pools and hot tubs.
Did your son participate in the kids or teen club at all?
He didn't this time around. He and his friend went and checked it out on embarkation day, and they ended up just never going back. Being 13, they were happy just to kind of move around the ship, check out the Lido deck, check out the arcade. He definitely maxed out the allowance that we gave him in the arcade and had a lot of fun and brought home a lot of pointless trinkets. But they really enjoyed their ability to kind of move around. I think if he'd been on his own without a friend, he probably would have spent more time in the teen club. But it was all the way at the front of the ship on deck 4 and a little bit hard to get to. And so I think that may have been another reason why they weren't thrilled to check it out.
This one also has maybe it is an indoor promenade. It kind of goes around the circumference of the theater. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, on this ship, I think it's called the Enchanted Forest.
That's right.
That was one of the first things that we wanted to check out. We got on board because looking at video tours on YouTube, it just looked wild. And so we thought, yeah, this is really a cool feature. And we checked it out on embarkation day and then never went back. So it was kind of cool to see, but we didn't spend a lot of time there. And so I have no idea if people tended to hang out there and congregate, but it was kind of a interesting feature and something you just don't see on modern ships.
being a remote worker and with Carnival doing away with a lot of the libraries, it's nice to just go up there because there's not a lot of foot traffic and you won't be bothered if you're working.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, you leave Tampa. What's your first port of call in the Western Caribbean? And give us the highlight.
Our first stop was Cozumel, and we had booked an excursion through Carnival. And it was an excursion that took you to Mayan ruins and then did some swimming in a Mayan cenote, which I'd never heard of before. But it's essentially where a sinkhole develops and then some groundwater comes up and makes like a natural pool. Mm-hmm. And then Mayan lunch. And it looked like it was a fairly new excursion. It didn't have a lot of reviews, maybe 5 or 6, but all of them were highly rated. And we thought it was a very good value for the amount of activities that were included. So we got aboard a bus and took about a 40-minute ride over to the San Gervasio ruins and had a pretty short tour there, probably about 40 to 45 minutes, but some really interesting Mayan ruins. The guide there explained what these particular ruins were all about, and you could see that they were still in decent shape considering their age. And from there, we went from the ruins and went to the cenote and were able to get on some life jackets. They had changing rooms there. The nice thing about this excursion is we could leave items on the bus and they were secure. So we didn't have to pay for additional locker rentals or things like that you might find on other excursions. And they also had lockable bags for your clothes when you were changing into your swimwear to go swimming. And so then they took us down to the entrance of the cenote, and it was kind of like a lazy river. So you had your life preservers, and they had some pool noodles that you could take along with, and you just entered the cenote and kind of wound around kind of leisurely. The weather was beautiful. The water was a little bit cool, but overall you got pretty used to it pretty quickly, and spent about an hour or so just enjoying the water, enjoying the sunshine. And then from there, we got out of the pool, and they had my son started calling Mexican salad a little bit of refreshment. They chopped up some cucumber, some jicama, watermelon, dressed it with a little bit of lime juice and some tahini, and served that. And so that was a nice little snack while we were changing back into our clothes. We got back on the bus. They took us just a few minutes down the road, and we stopped at a Mayan restaurant that served some amazing chicken tacos and probably one of the best margaritas I've ever had. Nice. The margarita was a little bit of an additional cost, but the lunch was included as part of the excursion. And then at that venue, they also had some Mexican chocolate tasting and some tequila tasting as well, and some other opportunities to buy souvenirs. So all in all, it was one of the best excursions that we've been on. Probably lasted about 5 or so hours. So we still had time once we got back to the port area to do a little bit of shopping. And so that's an excursion that I would definitely recommend. I think it's called the Swim in Mayan Cenote, an Ancient City. And so if anyone's interested in Cozumel, I'd recommend that one highly.
Yeah, I was going to say, they packed a lot in that 5 hours.
Yeah, and as much as we did, it didn't feel rushed, which is always a concern. But then again, we also didn't feel concerned about getting back and missing the onboard time. Of course, being booked through Carnival, you're pretty much guaranteed not to have an issue with that. But it was a great value and a wonderful time.
And then what was up next?
Next was Montego Bay in Jamaica. And originally we hadn't planned to do anything. We thought maybe we'd get off the ship, check out some of the shopping in the port area. We weren't planning to do a whole lot. But then the day before, my son asked me if Dunn's River Falls was in Jamaica. And I said, well, yes, it is. And he said, well, we're going to Jamaica. Could we go to Dunn's River Falls? And I said, let me see what's available. So we pulled up the shore excursions on the Hub app to see what was available. And it was. And I reached out to my friend Ron, the family that we were with, and asked if he'd be interested in going and with their kids. My wife wasn't terribly interested in going, so we ended up booking that excursion on board to go over to Dunn's River Falls. And the moms stayed back and the dads took the kids. And we ended up going to Dunn's River Falls. From Montego Bay, it's quite a long bus ride.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably an hour and a half each way. So that was about the only downside. But Dunn's River Falls was an incredible excursion. I'd done it once before on our very first cruise with my wife. And it was just a wonderful time, climbing up the falls with those guides and seeing some beautiful scenery and just having a lot of fun. And that excursion also included a lunch stop. And so we had some Jamaican jerk chicken and beans and rice and salad and things like that. The lunch was just okay. It was nice that they included it. But then it was a pretty quick hop back on the bus and do our best to make it back to the ship quickly. And our bus driver was driving like a madman to try to get us back in time. We had encountered some traffic on the way there, and I think that set back the whole itinerary. Mm-hmm. And we arrived back at the port with, I think, 5 minutes left before on board time, thanks to his aggressive driving.
Wow. Nice. Then your son liked that?
Yeah, he loved it. We got some great pictures and just had a lot of fun. That was probably, except for perhaps the drop slide, mm-hmm. I think his highlight of the cruise was the excursion at Dunn's River Falls.
It is a fun climb. Just remember your water shoes. What was after Jamaica?
The last port of call was Grand Cayman, and we decided that we would just have a beach day in Grand Cayman. So the weather was beautiful. The seas were relatively calm, so taking the water shuttle, there wasn't much issue there. And once we got to the port area, Tracy, who's the mom from the other family, they'd been to Grand Cayman a few times before, and so she recommended that we just grab a taxi or even the little miniature city bus / vans that they offer. And so we were able to get on one of those city vans and pay about $2.50 US per person to go from the port area over to 7 Mile Beach. And so we spent a few hours at 7 Mile Beach and just enjoyed the beautiful sand and water, and then got a little bite to eat there at the beach. There was some vendors selling patties, which are kind of almost like a Caribbean Hot Pocket. Mm-hmm. And then then there were a few restaurants that were available on the beach as well. And then we hopped the city bus, went back to the port area, did a little bit of shopping, and then we were back on board.
By midday, how many ships were out there off the coast?
We were very lucky. We were the only ship in port that day.
Very lucky.
Yeah, it felt like the stars aligned mm-hmm. With the experience on board the ship and everything. It was. We felt very blessed as far as how things went over the course of the entire cruise.
So you make your way back to the port of Tampa after Grand Cayman. How was your debark process?
Debark was an absolute breeze. Carnival does the digital debark. So a few days beforehand, you could go onto the Hub app and select what time frame you would like to get off the ship and whether or not you want to check your bags or do self-assist. And so it allows you to pick how many bags you'd like to check if you want to do that. And so we did that, and we selected a late disembarkation time because we knew we were going to be spending the day in Tampa and we were in a hurry to get off the ship. So Tampa also has the digital where they take your picture when you're getting on board and when you're disembarking mm-hmm. For customs. And so when our group number was called, we went down to the place where we disembarked. We got off the ship and walked through, found our bags very quickly, then got our picture taken and checked out through customs. I'd say from the time that our group was called until the time we were at the curb, probably 15 minutes, maybe even closer to 10. It was one of the smoothest disembarkations we've had.
Do you have any first-time tips to offer someone either sailing that Western Caribbean itinerary or doing a Carnival Spirit class ship?
I would say if you're stopping in Cozumel, check out that excursion. That was a surprise, just how wonderful it was. And I think for first-timers aboard Carnival Legend, something that also surprised us was there's a bar for those that want to grab a drink in a really nice location. There's a bar in the steakhouse that isn't really advertised, and you don't have to be dining in the steakhouse to go there. You can just walk up there and get service at that bar. And they have a nicer selection of spirits than some of the other bars. So if for those who drink, I would recommend checking out the steakhouse bar on Carnival Legend.
I think I might know the answer to this next question, but the biggest highlight of the cruise for y'all?
Biggest highlight, I would say, is that Cozumel excursion that we mentioned. They just did such a nice job of offering a variety of activities, a great service experience. We were very happy to tip our guides a little bit extra for the experience.
Did you feel like the value was there for the price you paid?
Absolutely, especially considering it was a spring break type of cruise during that time of year. We felt like the amount that we paid was really a good value, especially considering the lack of lines, the great service that was offered in the main dining room and by the staff all throughout the ship. Our friends, they had not cruised Carnival very much. I think she did one back in 2009 or something like that. They have sailed Disney most recently, and they remarked how surprised they were at the value offered for Carnival, the service, the quality of the food. They were really surprised and impressed by what Carnival had to offer on this ship.
What a great time. Well, in closing here, Ryan, your final thoughts of Carnival Legend.
I think final thoughts are, considering the age of the ship, it's an excellent value. It's very spacious. It has friendly staff. It doesn't have a ton of amenities like you'd find in some of the XL class or Vista class ships. But if you're looking to enjoy a cruise for the sake of cruising and want a wonderful experience, I couldn't recommend it higher.
We've been talking with Ryan about his 7-night cruise on Carnival Legend. Ryan, as always, good talking to you, my friend, and tell Sarah I said hello.
Thanks, Doug. I will. Have a good one.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,